Welcome to the Book Binge. I'm your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today is a follow-up to Tuesday's video. If you have not seen that already, it is me updating this year as of 2026, as of the end of May 2026, my top 15 plus books of all time. And in updating that video, there were a handful of new entries to the list, namely The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon, The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas, Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami, Perfume by Patrick Zuskind, and The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. I gave these to you guys just today, just now, in the order that I read them, with Crying of Lot 49 being a book that I actually read a few years ago, but forgot to include in the original version of the list last year. These other four are books that I've read as of 2026 and included on the updated list this year. So if you're curious about where those actually place on the list, I recommend you check that video out. I will put it up in the top corner for you guys to check out, and then you can come back to watch this video later, or you can watch that later. Doesn't really matter to me. The point is that today I am doing some more one-star reviews of some of my favorite books. I've done a couple of these videos already so far. I did a couple of them to cover the top 10, my top 10 books from the previous iteration of my list. Today is going to be focusing on these 5 new entries to the list, dedicated to these 5 entries because, well, they're new. So, you know, that makes for a fun video concept, I think. I had a lot of fun with the previous couple of these videos, even though they definitely ran a little bit longer than I anticipated. I anticipate that today's will as well, even though I'm only doing 2 reviews for each book this time as opposed to 3. But I did ask a friend to go over all of these entries for me, to go through and pick out some reviews for me. So when it comes right down to it, this is entirely blind on my side. I've not seen any of these reviews. I've not read any of them. So this is going to be a good bit of fun. So let's go ahead and switch on over, I think, to my desktop. We'll just throw my browser up there because reasons, and then we'll go ahead and start off, and we'll cover these reviews in the same order that I just gave you the books. So here is review number 1 for The Crying of Lot 49 by Thomas Pynchon. Let's open this up and let it load. Okay, a few paragraphs long I see. There's 1 like on it. Interesting. Pynchon seems to be wanting to say something about disillusionment and existential pain in this postmodern novel, but it is such a dry, convoluted delivery of an endless litany of factotums. Is that a word? 1 second. I gotta look that up. I've not seen that word before. A person whose job involves doing a wide variety of tasks or handling all sorts of job. Okay, jack of all trades. Litany of jack of all trades and lazy, pointless character sketches. Okay, that sentence actually makes sense in that context. Not to mention the fact that I read 152 pages without once being able to picture what Oedipa actually looked like or learned why I should care about her at all, that I left the novella feeling nothing but drained, disappointed, and thankful to be done with such time-wasting dreck. Okay, let's address that first sentence a little bit. He's not wrong that Pynchon seems to be wanting to say something about disillusionment and existential pain. That is correct. That is part of what this novel is doing. I do find the call out of it being dry and convoluted delivery of this stuff. Convoluted, I think, is actually part of the point. That's largely because, in my view, I actually have a review of this book on Goodreads as well. It was one of my first, like, real proper critical reviews that I wrote for the platform because I was just, like, moved to do so by the book. But convoluted does make sense, and part of that is because I think that Crying of Lot 49 is meant to be a satire of multiple things, and one of those things is being a satire of the mystery genre itself, so it is not actually trying to solve its own problem, and it does that on purpose, and that's not going to work for everybody, obviously, but as far as, like, being dry, fair enough, actually. I can totally see that point. It didn't really bother me when I read it. As for convoluted, not necessarily incorrect, but I think that that's also part of the point of the book, actually. Also, when it comes to, like, you know, not being able to picture Oedipa, that's also something that is, like, kind of a hallmark of, I'm not going to say Pynchon necessarily because, well, you know, I've only read Crying of Lot 49 is the only Pynchon I've read, but as far as like postmodernism is concerned, I think that that's a not uncommon thing to do, is to focus less on those kinds of details and to focus more on the more, I would say, like literary side of things. Breaking down the literary side of things, I think, is a little bit more of the point. So, interesting to call those things out. There is no doubt that Pynchon is a whiz with words. I'm especially drawn to a description of Oedipa as a prisoner among the pines and salt fogs, but even these he stumbles with more often than not. That might be a taste thing. I'm not entirely sure, but honestly, a valid point, because Pynchon does have some mighty fine sentences, but also others that make pretty much no sense unless you spend about 15 years trying to decipher it. So, how is it that someone can give a look that is sympathetic, annoyed, perhaps also a little erotic all at once? Because Pynchon is weird, man. Have you read his character names? Like, from literally any of his books, if you've read Pynchon's character names, he's a little bit strange. So some of these types of things are going to be strange. I think that's part of it, but you know what? Also fair enough. And with the prose peppered with words like, I'm not even going to try to pronounce these words because, and in the same sentence no less, for no redeeming reason, reaching for a dictionary seems pointless. Well, I mean, sure. I don't really see the point in complaining about vocab usage, generally speaking, unless it is actually pointless. If you look up the words and it doesn't actually mean anything, or there's no particular reason why that word would have been chosen instead of another, then I can understand criticizing it. I'm not going to look up these words to actually like figure out what they mean in the context of whatever sentence it was that they appeared in, because I don't know what sentence they appeared in. But all I know is that when I did look up words in the Crying of Lot 49 myself, I found them to be very purposely chosen. That's something that I've also had experience with certain other authors, so I'm not going to give much credence to this particular point. It just seems more like a personal problem in this case. Just try to explain to me what this nonsensical sentence is supposed to mean. Oh, cammed each night out of that safe furrow, the bulk of the city's waking each sunrise again, set virtuously to plowing. What rich soils had he turned? What concentric plains uncovered? Holy cow, my English is absolutely destroyed. I cannot speak today. I apologize. I'm not going to try to explain to you what that sentence means because I need the context of the actual book. That's part of Pynchon's writing. It's sometimes very dense, and you have to look into it quite closely to piece together what some things are actually saying. So I'm not going to read into that sentence too much at the moment because I'm tired, but I'm not going to necessarily give particular credence or lack of credence to these things. Some of this, when it comes to like vocab and stuff like that, I think is probably a personal problem as far as this reviewer is concerned. That's just my instinct. Anyway, turns out that Pynchon himself was in agreement. He once said of the novella, "As is clear from the up and down shape of my learning curve, however, it was too much to expect that I'd keep on for long in this positive or professional direction. The next story I wrote was The Crying of Lot 49, which was marketed as a novel, and in which I seem to have forgotten most of what I thought I'd learned up until then." I'm not entirely sure how that actually supports your point. An author is free to, dislike their own work for one reason or another, but you didn't really necessarily say how this actually proves your own point as you made in the previous paragraph. So I don't know, man. Seems like a you problem. Anyway, like Oedipa should have done from the start of her never concluded journey, again, that was purposeful, do yourself a favor and don't slip down this rabbit hole. I thought that it was very worth slipping down the rabbit hole, actually, largely because of the never concluded journey side of things, because it was like very much a satire of a lot of things, and that made it very enjoyable for me personally. Obviously, this man did not enjoy it, and that's fair enough. Some of his points are valid. Some of them seem more like personal problems than not, which, is to be expected in a 1-star review. Not the worst 1-star review I've ever read, to be honest. But let's move on to the second review for The Crying of Lot 49. I actually wouldn't be particularly offended if that was my book and he were to have written that review of it, for example. So it was, like I said, not a terrible review of the book. Anyway, this next one. Aaron says, I wanted to love this book, and I hated it, perhaps all the more so for my dashed expectations. It's doubly frustrating as I love books that require a bit of work from the reader. This is a book about a secret organization that may or may not exist. The narrative barrels along like a roller coaster, all brief sensations, splashes of color, abrupt changes of direction, flashing lights. Honestly, that's a pretty accurate description of how the plot moves forward in The Crying of Lot 49, so he definitely read it. From the outset, there is an air of slapstick. True. Characters have throwaway joke names. This is also kind of like I mentioned with the previous review. Pynchon does this a lot with character names in general, none of which mean anything at all. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. That's just kind of Pynchon's style. I don't necessarily think that that's got to be a critique. I mean, if you're reading a fantasy book, for example, just because many of those names are completely made up nonsense and don't mean anything at all doesn't necessarily mean anything to the book's detriment. That's fine. Also, like Fallopian and Dr. Hilarious are frankly hilarious names, by the way. Depresso is also quite funny. So, I feel like you're just taking that particular thing too seriously if that's making you butt hurt or something. I don't know. It's all breathlessly strung together. Stuff happens. Bam, boom, off we go, lurching off in another direction. Do we care about any of the characters? Absolutely not. Boom. I mean, that's because I honestly don't think this book is really focused on any of the characters. It's more about the satire, as I've kind of said already in this video. So if character is what you're really looking for in terms of like wanting to really connect with them, you're not going to get that from Crying of Lot 49 for sure, because it's too short and it is focused on different things. So valid criticism if you want good characters. That's just not what the book is doing. Shortly after page 100, I resigned myself to not following, or more accurately, just not caring about the plot. I finished it out of a sense of completist duty. That's also fair. But only insofar as if you don't realize that the plot is itself an entire satire of itself, basically. And if you kind of get that point, then it might be easier to swallow, I think, maybe. I'm not sure if that's what this person's particular problem was, but who am I to really judge in this case? There is some impressive Shakespearean theater, play within a play stuff that sits like a big digression of dullness in the middle. Actually, no, that's actually a big part of what the actual like metatextual side of things is going on, like the satire element that I'm talking about here, the metatextual satire of it, that theater, that play within a play of the book is actually a big part of that. So I think you just missed the point in that case. There are some fun bits of science thrown into the mixer, Maxwell's demon, around for 10 or so pages. I also liked the one-line discussion of free will and determinism. You think a man's mind is a pool table? Yeah. Pynchon throws in this kind of stuff. That's cool. He's right to say that those are fun bits, because they are. But like everything else, it soon spun out of the ride, and we're on to other randomness. Not wrong. I mean, it's a valid criticism because it's not wrong. If you're thinking of something like Pynchon and stuff just kind of being random and feeling like he's just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, is not entirely incorrect, but a lot of those things are being handled in my view, a satirical way that kind of works for the general tone of the book. So it didn't bother me. Obviously it bothered him. Some images stay with me. The boy and his dog in a sinking submarine, Mucho's car lot, the guy using facial expressions as a kind of superpower. Some stretches of writing are great. Maybe the atmosphere of uncertainty and paranoia was successful. It reminded me of Philip K. Dick's Freakouts, particularly Valis, but PKD's books engaged me, and this, my first Pynchon book, failed to on all levels. I think that this review is mostly valid, actually. It's just, kind of not clicking with some of the things that the book is doing, and wanting it to do some things that it is not doing, which happens. Frankly, not every book is going to be for everybody, so that's actually quite valid, and cool for him to like really acknowledge like maybe some things are similar to something that he does like, but it just didn't engage him. Fair enough. If it didn't engage him, fine. All I know is that it clicked for me. Like definitely engaged me on all levels. I think that The Crying of Lot 49 was easily the best starting place for Pynchon that I could have picked for myself personally. And so apparently that wasn't the case for Aaron. But also, who knows? I haven't read any other Pynchon. Maybe Pynchon's just not for him. Maybe it's just this book. No way of really knowing. But those were interesting reviews. Thank you, Reen, by the way, for picking out all of these reviews. Next up, we're going on to the first review for The Three Musketeers. This is going to be from Gabrielle. And it's going to start off with disgusting. Oh boy, I'm going to be salty about this one, aren't I? It starts rather strangely with the hero taking any smile or notice from casual passersby as an insult. In fact, the hero's sworn enemy, who he's eternally chasing after and trying to kill, is a man who made fun of his horse. At the time, I thought it rather funny in a weird sort of way and read on, but it only gets worse. The hero starts challenging people he bumps into on the street, literally to duels, and killing them without further ado, despite the fact that it was usually him who was the one not looking where he was going. Incidentally, this was how he met his musketeer friends, three guys as foolish and uptight as he is. Now, this is actually an interesting point to really get hung up on. Contextually speaking, as far as the historical context of France at this time, especially with regard to musketeers and that kind of thing, is actually very accurate. Duels and people instigating fights with each other over literally nothing was a very common thing at the time. So if you take issue with that, sorry for being historically accurate. That's a you problem. Anyway, but then they get into girls and it gets really bad. The hero is one of those people who thinks he's the cat's pajamas and naturally thinks that everyone else is as crazy about him as he is about himself. Well, of course, he's like 19 years old. That's normal. When he sees a pretty girl on the street, he immediately falls head over heels in love at her, despite the fact that she's married and has told him repeatedly to get lost, in Old English language, of course, and has the even though it's a French novel, by the way, and has the audacity to follow her around wherever she goes. But the worst thing is that in the end, she gives in to him and rewards him for his love, or rather pig-headedness, or rather not the worst, as it gets worse from there. And this is a great classic. It's utterly disgusting and it's not even well written. Disagree on the well-written thing. I mean, unless you read a bad translation of it, which could totally be true. The translation I read was very well written. And as far as what you're finding utterly disgusting are things that are A, both totally normal for the time period, and B, totally normal for classic novels in general, because they're depicting things in often heightened ways. Like, you know, you take the realism of how of human nature and the way that people just generally behave in certain contexts, and then you like dial that up to 10, and that is how a lot of classic fiction actually depicts characters. It seems very unrealistic unless you actually understand what those books are trying to do. So I think this person just kind of inherently misunderstands a lot of the point of what the book is doing. That's my only guess at what's going on here, especially with regards to, like, you know, taking issue with how the hero bumps into everybody and challenging them literally to duels. And, like, yeah, I thought it rather funny in a weird way at first. And it is funny. It's meant to be funny because it's kind of satirizing the fact that that was a very real part of French history at the time. So sorry it didn't click with you, I guess, but skill issue. Anyway. Next review for The Three Musketeers from Gabby. Another one of these. Anyway, I don't usually blast the classics, but I have to make an exception for this one. I had no idea The Three Musketeers was a rendition of Disney characters meeting the Three Stooges, with a little Adam Sandler thrown in for heart. I haven't watched any Adam Sandler movies, for example, personally, and I have also not seen any Three Stooges stuff, so frankly, a lot of that intended reference in this review flies over my head personally. In either case, let's see, where was I? Forgets all about basic writing procedures like character or basic logical plot development. Those things do not exist here. Did we read the same book? Or are you using logical as the linchpin of your entire sentence? And your logic isn't that of novels that are a couple hundred years old. I'm not entirely sure what to make of this sentence, to be honest. Dumas never uses one or two words when 347 will do instead. You're going to get mad at Dumas for being wordy? Of all of the classic authors, you're going to point at Dumas for being wordy. So there's heavy doses of nonsense interspersed with lots and lots of behavior that makes absolutely no sense. Again, this is kind of what I was saying about classic novels in general, just kind of heightening the way that characters are portrayed, and Dumas in particular heightens these to a certain degree, even beyond normal, because that's part of the dramatic irony of what he writes. So failure to understand the point, I guess, even taking into consideration that times were different when this was published and the novel takes place in another country, the same country it was written in, by the way. There's no accounting for, well, mostly anyway. There's no accounting for the outright stupidity of the people and their behavior. Disagree. Besides all this, why does no one ever point out that Dumas simply couldn't count to 4? There were not 3 Musketeers by the end of the book, there were 4. I'm going to repeat a sentence that I just said 10 seconds ago. Failure to understand the point. Further, the book itself was more about that 4th guy than it was about the other threesome. You're misunderstanding the point so much that you literally commented the exact point in your own sentence. What are you doing? This is not a spoiler, by the way. It is revealed at the beginning of the novel that we're going to be dealing with 4 dim-witted men, not 3. I can definitely summarize this entire paragraph, probably this entire review, to be honest, as a failure to understand the point. I thought maybe there was a benefit to reading this novel just for the historical significance. Wrong again. Absolutely nothing redeems this book. Not even the final sentence. The one that made me cry approximately 5 months ago. Incorrect. Anyway, what's worse is that it's part of a trilogy, and guess who bought the whole set? Yep, that would be me. I can't wait to see what happens 20 years after the first one ends not. Good for you, you don't have to. This book is perfectly standalone. Yeah, honestly, I don't even have anything more to say. Like, basically, this entire thing can be summarized with failure to understand the point. This person just clearly fails to understand the entire point of the book. That's not even worth addressing any more than I already have. Let's move on to Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. And this one is probably, these reviews are probably going to really get my goose, to be honest, because this book was one, if you've watched my review of this book, you know that I really struggled to actually explain why I liked the book. So I'm probably going to struggle to counter any points. So we'll see what happens here. This book wasn't good. Disagree. We can set aside Murakami's complete aversion to women beyond their bodies and their ability to assist the men in the story. To be fair, bringing up criticisms about how Murakami writes women, particularly in this book, are actually kind of valid because it's not fantastic. It just didn't bother me personally. So that's actually a valid point. I will admit that much. I've read plenty of authors who do just that, though it seems Murakami takes an odd pride in doing it. Now, he just kind of did it in a exceptional degree in this book, we shall say. My biggest issue with this book is it feels like I just spent 400 pages letting a crazy homeless man talk to me on the street. I raise you one question. Is that a bad thing? Sometimes it is. In fact, last time that I was in the city back in December, there was a crazy homeless person trying to talk to me and the person I was with on the street, and that did not go well. However, is that always a bad thing? That's the question. What was the point of this novel? It might be the first one I've read where I'm not sure there was one. That's not a good thing. I don't know that that's a bad thing, though, actually. Partially because what is the point of the book? That's kind of hard to explain for the same reason why it's hard for me to explain why I love the book so much. Like, what is the point? That's kind of hard to actually, like, quantify, right? Like, you can't really put that into words. However, if you are understanding that the book is very much an exploration of, I suppose, in a sense, the role of the subconscious within the conscious's mind, that is one very big part of the book that could be considered the point, but only one point out of maybe several, I guess. So I can definitely point out at least one thing that the book is doing as a point. So, Murakami's The Mind is Everything but Also Nothing. So definitely got a little bit from the book with regards to the mind. Pseudo-intellectual theme at the center of this was very interesting at first. It was very interesting the whole way through. Also, it's not pseudo-intellectual, by the way. But then it didn't go anywhere. What do you mean it didn't go anywhere? That was literally the entire point of the two plot lines converging. Huh? Excuse me? The premise of the story, good at first, but didn't go anywhere. Did we read the same book? The twin narratives, intriguing at first, but the reveal at the end was telegraphed in the first third. I would not, I mean, if you got it in the first third, fair enough. Like, I can't say that you didn't, but it wasn't telegraphed in the first third to the extent that, like, I actually fully got the reveal until, like, 2/3 of the way through was more like when I got it, when I was able to put it together. Well, like, I had theories about it in the first third, I should say, but it wasn't like I was certain about it at that point, so I guess that's kind of fair. Felt like it didn't really go anywhere. I don't know why you're saying all of these things didn't go anywhere. Like, you can say you didn't like where they went, but I'm not sure they didn't go anywhere. Because the entire point of the book was the convergence. Well, maybe not the entire point per se, but like what the book does is converging those things, and that convergence is part of what made it so good for me anyway. It feels like in movies when they run out of money for the second half and have to make do with what they have. I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree on this point. He took us to the top of the mountain promising a beautiful view, but instead we got there and it was cloudy and we had to turn around, but the destination isn't why you read books. Oh, but you see, the problem is, you failed to see the beauty that can be found in a cloudy sky. There are things to see up at the top of the mountain that isn't just that beautiful view. You know, you can be disappointed that it was cloudy up there when you got there, but like that doesn't mean that that's the only reason to be up there. So, skill issue. And while Murakami's translated writing is certainly effortless to read, I again found myself wondering what I was reading it for. There is no perspective in this book. A whiny man whom too many good things happen to, mirrored with the story of a whiny man in a weird place, ooh, whom not enough good things happen to. I'm going to disagree on this point as well, because both those things are objectively wrong. Whom too many good things happen to? Huh? Not enough good things happen to on the other side? No? Question mark? Development, conflict, basic plot progression, nope. The entire book has a ton of conflict. What are you talking about? Like, this book is intrinsically about the conflict of the main character, just about being murdered, for one, and being very heavily targeted for what he and only he knows, for two. To say there's no conflict is objectively incorrect. Instead, you get 400 pages of pontifications from people who I really don't care to hear from. Fair enough, if that's just not your preference, with no justification in between. Disagree. I don't need a Saturday morning cartoon with good guys and bad guys and easy to follow plots. What I do need, that Murakami did not give me, is a reason to turn to the next page and see what happens. And yet you did. Checkmate, atheist. Anyway, I feel like I didn't learn anything from reading this novel and instead was forced to be a captive audience for someone trying to sell me a timeshare. Honestly, I could hardly disagree with the review of this book more. Like, I guess it makes sense. But I'm kind of flabbergasted, to be honest. Like, so many of these points are just straight up wrong. Like, just objectively wrong. Like, I felt like it didn't go anywhere, and that being the entire thesis of the review. You're gonna say that a book like Hardboiled Wonderland and the End of the World, which combines like 5 different genres into it at the same time, doesn't go anywhere? Hard disagree. Anyway, let's move on to the next Hardboiled Wonderland review. See if this is any worse. I have a thing, a bias, some might say, others might just call it weird, whenever an author pauses his story to add a bit of character development or to change the tone by including the lyrics of a song, the lines of a poem, or if a character says, "About this dream I had last night." I skip ahead. I never read the song or the poem or learn about the dream. I'm sorry, but if you're going to outright brag about skipping things that are part of the books, like the people who say they don't read the prologues of fantasy books, your opinion is invalid. I don't even know if I should continue reading this review. I was once asked why. The best answer I can give is I don't like to downshift reading speed. If you have to downshift reading speed to read about a dream that a character had last night, I'm sorry, skill issue. What? What are you even talking about? I read a nonfiction book at a medium to slow speed to absorb facts, a pulpy novel very fast, a poem or lyrics very slow to savor the undercurrents, and I never read dreams. Never. So you're complaining about what you fail to do as a reader. You fail to fulfill your end of the contract when reading the book, to actually read the book, and now you're going to complain about it being... You're going to potentially complain about it being bad? Are you hearing yourself? I don't enjoy attempting to decipher what is, in real life, always going to be open to interpretation, and in a book, intentionally vague and indecipherable. Then your opinion is invalid. Spoiler alert, after getting pretty far into this, otherwise not badly written book, I gradually came to realize that more than half of the story is going on inside the unconscious of the main character. I see where this is going now. And it was the half with all the fantastical characters. While it was not in a dream, it was the same thing for me, so it was impossible for me to care any more about the plot. You remember that other review earlier in this video where I said failure to understand the point about 15 times? This is that times 15,000, maybe. What are we even... Oh, this plot has fantastical characters and might have some intriguing stuff going on, but it turns out it's going on in the subconscious of the main character's mind the entire time, so I don't care about the plot anymore. Huh? Who are you? What? If you have made it this far in my review, you may not be put off by this story gimmick. Nobody's going to be put off by this story gimmick because nobody is so picky as you to not read an entire half of a book just because it takes place in the subconscious of the main character's mind, which they only really put together as a review, you know, through the book. Like, you have to put that together as you read. And if putting that together puts you off, then like you're free to not really like that plot, and you're free to not like it for that reason. But to say that you inherently don't care about it and imply very heavily that you probably skipped a lot of it after you figured it out just because it was in the subconscious of the mind, this is all your own fault. Like, what? If I were not, I would have finished the book. Okay, yeah, so it definitely, apparently DNF'd the book. Oh yeah, quit reading partway. Okay, I forgive the person who wrote the other 1-star review for this book because at least you finished the book. You were inherently wrong about your understanding of a lot of it, but at least you didn't DNF it because it has a dream. What is this person doing? There are 2 likes on this, by the way. How are there 2 likes on this review? This is one of the stupidest things I think I've ever read in my life. Reen, you rage baited me. I'm going to type that to him right now. I just read the 2nd review for Hard-Boiled Wonderland, and what the heck is this person's problem, LOL. Anyway, let's move on to Perfume. Oh, joy. That is a gem. This is one of the worst reviews I think I've ever read, actually. Like, if you're going to straight up brag about the fact that you skip parts of books, your opinion is invalid. Like, you know, if you say that you have to skim certain stuff because you can't handle it anymore, that's different than saying that you always skip a particular type of thing in a book. Like, why are you even reading then? Just do something else. Like, come on. Oh my goodness. That is a special review. Anyway, okay, Lily says about Perfume, the story of a murderer. I finally finished this bloody book, and let me tell you, not worth it. Unfortunate. And people call this a classic? Well, I mean, that depends on your definition. I would say it is absolutely going to be a classic, and it should be considered a classic, and if nothing else, it is definitely a modern classic. You know, it's only like 40-something years old, or something like that. Incredible book. Anyway, I'm going to spoil like this whole book, so if you for some ungodly reason want to read the Psycho's Messed Up Wet Dream, do not read this review. I mean, there's your spoiler warning, I guess, but just going by the Psycho's Messed Up Wet Dream, okay, let's just see how bad this review is. Oh, good grief, that's a bit lengthy. Okay, here goes. If, however, you make the completely sane and reasonable decision to not read this book, please enjoy my rant review. Okay. I might still be a little bit spicy from the last review that I just read. Let's see how this goes. First off, the first half of this book is so boring. Honestly, valid. Like, if you're just not going to be into the prose, if you're not a very prose forward reader at all, like if you just don't care in any way, shape, or form about prose, then Perfume is probably not going to be for you at all. So I actually don't recommend the book for you to read, largely because the book is so focused on the writing, and specifically writing from the point of view of scent. And that's a huge part of what makes this book like stand out. I really loved it for that reason. So if you're going to say that the first half is so boring, that's like actually kind of valid. Like if you're just not into the writing and the writing itself doesn't draw you into the actual world and what the book is doing as a result, because like they're kind of going hand in hand, yeah, it might not be for you. Fair enough. Like absolutely nothing interesting happens. Valid. Like I could read a How to Make Perfume 2000 step-by-step guide and I'd be more entertained. Okay, I don't believe that that's actually true. However, you do make a reasonable enough point about the writing of it being very focused in a very specific way, and if you don't vibe with that, you're not going to like the book, so fair enough. The book is really easy to read, and once you start, it's kind of like knowing there's going to be a car crash sometime in the future on this deserted road. That's accurate. It takes almost no effort to stay there and watch the road waiting for it to happen, but it takes so long that you get incredibly bored waiting for it to happen. Okay, that's actually a pretty creative way to actually put that sentiment. Respect. That said, sometime around a third or halfway through the book, I kind of started to catch on to how erotically the whole thing was written. Yes. Exactly that. At first, I thought it was maybe just how I was reading it. I myself was a bit of a sicko that thought the writing about a weird, unscented murderer was erotic, but by the end of it, I realized that no, it was not my imagination, but in fact, this whole book was some guy's sadistic wet dream. No, actually, not a sadistic wet dream, but as far as viewing the, the prose as being erotically written is actually a pretty good read because it is focused on scent in that specific way, because you are following a character who is a murderer, the story of a murderer who is unscented and who does what he does in order to create scents, basically. And yeah, from the point of view of that character, viewing that very scent-based type of prose and that being written in a semi-erotic way is actually all accurate and correct. That's the point. Now, if you're going to say that it's some guy's sadistic wet dream, yeah, of course, it's the murderer's sadistic wet dream. It's a murderer. That's, again, kind of the point. You think I'm kidding? No, I don't think you're kidding. You're actually perfectly correct about all of that. So if you have a problem with that, personal problem. But again, fair enough. Like, if you're not into that, you're not into that. Let's see what the rest of this says anyway. A good portion of the first part of the book is spent with Grenouille living... Sorry, I'm going to mispronounce that. French is terrible. Living in a cave where he imagines himself the king of his own world of scent and gets off on remembering the scent of a young girl he killed. Correct. Later in the story, he finds another young girl, as in hasn't gone through puberty young, and he describes smelling her budding breasts and her vagina. It's kind of horrifying how sexualized it is. Ironically, it's actually the opposite of sexualized, because the killer doesn't actually care about those things in a sexual way. It's very pointedly doesn't care at all about that aspect. It is only the scent. Yeah, anyway. Then at the end of the book, Grenouille dons his master perfume as he's about to be hanged, and the whole crowd immediately loves him and then gets so turned on by the smell that the entire town is a giant orgy. Yeah, the ending is very strange. That is true. And I know some people who really like a lot of this book but are very put off by the ending, so that's understandable. I get it. And then to top it all off, he decides that he doesn't want people to love him because he hates people and would in fact prefer to die. So he travels all the way to Paris where he stands in front of a group of people, tips the whole bottle of his perfume on himself, which then causes all these people to love him so much that they absolutely must have a piece of him. So they attack, cut him up, and then eat him. Yeah, like I said, the ending very, very strange. If that puts you off, fair. Definitely fair. I spent like a month reading this boring book. I read this in like a few days. One second. Let me go to my books real quick and see how long I actually read this because it was not very long at all. I plowed through this. Also, I wish Goodreads would load quicker. Where is Perfume? Let's see. March 9th through March 13th. Yeah, so I read this in just a few days. Like, this is very quick for me. Anyway, let's see. Spent like a month reading this boring book just to get to the end and be met with orgies and cannibalism. I did not sign up for this. Yeah, I get it, honestly. The only good thing about this book is that I now never have to read a word of it again. This review is a tale of two parts. One is I mean, a lot of it is actually totally bad. Like, I really get not being into the way this is written. Like, if that doesn't just happen to vibe with you for whatever reason, fair. I get it. And also, the ending is a bit much. Fair. I get it. I totally get those criticisms. There are some aspects of this that I'm not entirely like, on the same page as the reviewer on, but I kind of find this reaction to it funny because, yeah, the valid question. What is this book? Yeah, the ending is a lot. The ending is a lot. Yeah. However, you are trying to yuck somebody else's yum. So, sorry, but you're wrong. Anyway, that is the first review. This was a very good review to follow up the last one because I actually found this one more funny than not. So that was entertaining. Okay, next review for Perfume. What the hell? This is serious. Okay, this is somebody who reviewed it like literally only a couple of months before me, like a month and a half before me. This is seriously the most disgusting, dumbest, and uncanny book I've ever read. I mean, I'm going to disagree on dumbest. Most disgusting could totally be true. Uncanny? I'm not sure that word means what you think it means. I do not even want to get into details, but what the hell? Firstly, he isolated himself for 7 years in some cave and turned himself into an animal. He was literally eating moss and licking moisture off the cave walls. And the way the father was fantasizing about his own daughter, disgusting, bro. Welcome to discussing people. It's just a character, man. And then the father adopts the killer of his daughter as his son and even kisses him on the lips. Part of these are cultural differences. Part of these are just weird character traits because characters. It's a character, bro. Also, why are you homophobic? Anyway, before the guy got executed, 10,000 people who came to watch the execution suddenly started worshiping him because of some perfume he used. Some perfume he made through lots of time and effort. Anyway, they were literally bowing down to him, and he was excused. The ending is equally as dumb and disgusting. He dies because the people loved him so much, they killed and ate him. Please give me back my time that I wasted reading this. Also, this is rated 0 stars and not 1. Honestly, I don't even know what to say again. This is honestly just kind of funny. However, I will bring back that sentence again. Failure to understand the point. When it comes to this kind of aspect about the whole ending, a lot of it is actually very thematically, strangely thematically constructed in a way that I found rather effective personally. But like some of these other criticisms are very specific about like, what are you even complaining about? You're just complaining about a character who is weird and has done weird things. I don't even get what the actual complaint is here. So that's weird, but okay. That's the second review, I guess. Not nearly as funny as the last one, but still kind of funny, actually. Both of those were more funny than not. However, these next couple of reviews for the Sparrow, I'm probably going to get defensive over. So let's see how this goes. Oh boy, this one has 28 likes. This is... Okay, let's see how this goes. This is on a did not finish shelf. So let's see how this goes. I give up. This is one of the most absurd books I've ever tried to read. Okay, Earth finally makes contact with a planet in Alpha Centauri, and who decides to make the first trip there, but a group of Jesuits, a young astronomer, a middle-aged doctor, and her engineer husband, and a beautiful computer expert, none of whom have any interstellar experience. Yeah, you do kind of have to suspend your disbelief a tiny bit for the actual selection of the crew, but, you know, on the as far as like the Jesuits are concerned, like the fact that they're the ones putting forward the mission and not like a proper, you know, astronomical agency, it kind of makes sense in its own way. But like I said, a little bit of suspension of disbelief goes a long way there. Did I mention that they are making this trip inside a hollowed out asteroid? Makes perfect sense to me. Well, yeah, it's called science fiction. If you bothered to actually read the explanation for it and then suspend your disbelief, be like, okay, yeah, I accept the mechanics of this, it's fine, you would be fine. And if you can't accept the mechanics of it, sorry, I guess. I did. Anyway, apparently something goes tragically wrong and one priest returns to Earth horribly deformed and in disgrace. Yes, that is the entire point of the book. Correct. I can only suspend disbelief so far, not very far apparently, since you didn't attempt to for any of these other points that we just talked about. And this book pushed me to my limits. You must not have very far limits. Anyway, the lack of any scientific basis for anything in the story is irritating. No, incorrect. There's not lack of scientific basis. Doria Russell just handles it in a not specific way. Like, vague isn't the right term, but it's in a way where it's not the forefront. Like, this is science fiction book technically, but that's not the point of it. Like, it's not trying to be a hard science fiction book. It's not. It just uses some basic ideas that are essentially sound, if you are willing to suspend your disbelief to be like, okay, let's just say that this works in this time period because the book needs it to. Fair enough. That also sounds more flippant of me than it really should be. Like, it's not like it's that unbelievable. It really isn't, but apparently this person had a problem with it. Anyway, the characters are caricatures for whom I cared nothing. I mean, I'm sorry if you did not care about these characters, but these characters are not caricatures. If you're gonna call characters caricatures, especially as far as like the role they fill in the crew, for example, they are the least caricatured characters in that kind of instance that could be. Like, I'd hate to see you talk about the characters of a Michael Crichton book, for example, where they really are just caricatures. Anyway, the plot is absurd. There is enough foreshadowing early on to let you know where the story is going. Well, yeah, that's the entire point. The entire point of the book for like most of it is, you know, shit's going to hit the fan. It's just a matter of what exactly that looks like, and you're spending the entire book with the tension building until that actual reveal occurs. I would say it's less so foreshadowing per se, but yeah, like, that is the entire point of the book. Supposedly there is some deep philosophical religious revelation in the book that brings it all together. It does, actually, and since you didn't finish the book, you didn't get to the chapter that is like single-handedly one of the most impactful things I've ever read in my life. Yeah. Anyway, I got 179 pages in and just gave up. You only got 179 pages in? Out of like nearly 500? You quit this book less than 200? Okay, whatever. It's just not worth the tedium of the story to get through. I mean, to be fair, the book is definitely a slow burn, and if you're not in for that specific slow burn, I can definitely see how this would be one that somebody would not finish. Like, that is very clear and evident to me. It's like, you didn't finish, but yeah, you definitely did not read anywhere near enough of this book for, frankly, any of this review to be valid to me. So, yikes. Anyway, next review, final review for this video. The scientists are idiots, and here are the reasons why. Uh-oh, is this going to be... Wait a minute, is this a review that I've already read? This might be a review that I've read before. Anyway, 1. They went in search of an alien civilization by literally flying in the general direction of Alpha Centauri. They figured out the exact location along the way. Yeah, so? That's honestly not necessarily untrue of a lot of civilizational, like, adventuring that happens. They arrived on the alien planet, then attempted to figure out where to land their spacecraft. Yeah, because they don't know specifically where to land it at the time, obviously. Like, what are you talking about? Imagine if NASA had done that for the moon landing in the 1960s. The moon landing isn't, 17 light years away? Huh? They tested the edibility of alien vegetation and wildlife by eating said alien vegetation and wildlife. Welcome to human history. When someone died from the alien diet, our scientists couldn't quite figure out why. They couldn't quite figure out why, to the extent that they don't even know if it was actually the alien diet that did it. They weren't able to return to their spaceship in orbit because someone literally used up the fuel in the lander just to show off to the leader of the team. It was a miscalculation. Yes, that is an idiotic move. The character acknowledged it, actually. But making an idiotic decision does not necessarily make one an idiot, inherently. They didn't have a clue what to do upon meeting the aliens for the very first time. No SOPs, nothing. What does SOPs mean? Do I even want to look this up? Oh, standard operating procedure. Fair enough. You're meeting an alien race. How is there a standard operating procedure for something that is literally inherently not standard? I'm so confused by some of these points. Anyway, they emerged out of the lander for the very first time on an alien planet without spacesuits. That is one of those things of suspension of disbelief. But I'm pretty sure the book does mention that, like, it's pretty evident that the air and stuff down there is, you know, completely viable for them to, like, be able to breathe and whatnot. So it's like, it's fine. If you're getting hung up on that point, I kind of understand, but you're making a big deal out of it, I guess. They disregarded the possibility of contaminating the aliens with pathogens, of being infected by pathogens. That is true, actually. They did kind of do that a little bit, to a certain degree. But again, one of those things where it's like, fine. I'm not getting hung up on it personally. They spent 6 weeks on an alien planet before one of them said, hey, maybe we should start planting our own food. You think? Anyway, they plant human food on an alien planet and disregarded the possibility of destroying the local ecosystem. So here you're just making 2 points that counteract each other. Okay, whatever. They had no way to maintain radio contact with Earth and shrugged it off because everyone they loved was on the planet with them. That's called making the best of a very bad situation. They were stranded on the planet. What are they going to do? Most of these characters end up dead by the hands of the locals. This is not a spoiler. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a part of the conflict of the book. They deserve to die anyway. Disagree. These scientists are the... Why was this the last review? Why couldn't we have ended this video on that first review for Perfume? Some of these points are somewhat valid, I will say that, but some of these are also very stupid points that if you're getting hung up on them, that's a personal problem. Just suspend your disbelief a little bit, man. Also, the point of the book isn't the science. That is inherently not the point of the book. It is the religious and spiritual side of things that are the point of the book, so... You know, thanks for completely disregarding the entire point of the book, but whatever, dude. Anyway, yeah, that one's getting my goose a little bit, so I'm going to move on. Or I'm going to attempt to. Oh, that's the wrong screen. That's the right screen. There we go. Welcome to Green Screen Land. Anyway... That's the end of that video. That's the end of the reviews that I'm going to talk about in this video anyway. Some of those were actually quite fun. Some of them bring up some valid points. Some of them were really, really freaking stupid. And frankly, that entire range of things is something to expect when you're reading 1-star reviews. Some of those really got to me. Some of them were just funny. But yeah, which one of these reviews was your favorite? I would actually be curious to know. It's got to be definitely that first review for Perfume. That one was honestly quite hilarious. Like that, I totally get it, and it was funny all at the same time. But yeah. Yeah, that's going to be the end of this video, I guess. I actually had a little bit more fun with some of these reviews than I anticipated, and I think I got more heated at a couple more of these than I did with either the last couple parts of this series that I did. So that was also a bit interesting. If there's, you know, some more of my favorite books that you would like to see a video of this sort about, there are a few entries that are still on my top favorite books of all time list that I have not actually covered in either the last couple of videos or in today's video. So if you would like something like that, let me know. I'm definitely curious to do a part 4 for this. I think that would be a little bit of fun. So if that's something you would like to see, be sure to let me know. Otherwise, that's going to be the end of this video. Like I said, I did have a good bit of fun with a couple of those reviews. That first review for Perfume, man, that one made this entire video worth it. So thank you to whoever wrote that one. Let me just go ahead and figure out who that was so I can thank them again. Lily's review was quite funny for that, so thank you for that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this video. If you did, I greatly appreciate it. For now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me Casey, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.